Time is precious, and so are our pets. So time with our pets is extra precious. That's why we started Dutch. Dutch provides 24/7 access to licensed vets, with unlimited virtual visits and follow-ups for up to 5 pets. You can message a vet at any time and schedule a video visit the same day. Our vets can even prescribe medication for many ailments, and shipping is always free. With Dutch, you'll get more time with your pets and year-round peace of mind when it comes to their vet care.
Hello, book lovers. Welcome to Must Love Books. Hello and welcome back to Must Love Books podcast. Today I am here with author MJ Etkind to celebrate the release day of The Witch of Wall Street. Hi MJ, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I am so excited to have you on here. The Witch of Wall Street is, first off, such a eye-catching title. Like, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, I need this. This is all I want.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. So for our listeners, can you tell us a little bit about what The Witch of Wall Street is about?
Yeah, so The Witch of Wall Street is about an actual, real life witch who works as an investment banker. And she goes to this benefit one night and she hooks up with her former high school rival. And while they're hooking up, her broomstick runs away with his enchanted taxi medallion. They did not want to have an entire adventure. Even worse, her bank is attempting to undercut his nonprofit for a piece of property that's going to give housing to a ton of people. So they've got this magical quest they're going to go on across New York, all while she's kind of tied up into this really ethical conundrum.
Love it. A little bit of chaos, a little bit of magical misfortunes.
Yes, so much chaos, so much magical misfortune.
So what were some of your writing inspirations for The Witch of Wall Street?
Yeah, so I work kind of in finance, and so I wanted to write kind of a big city witch. I think a lot of times I love cottagecore novels. They're great, but I think a lot of times witches get relegated to kind of really cozy cottagecore aesthetic, and I wanted a big city witch, and I wanted her to be kind of a witch, capital W witch, I guess. As well. And so she is sometimes a difficult to like character because she is in this kind of really brutal and tough finance world and has to compete with all these finance bros. So she's can be quite prickly, and I think that's a lot of her growth in the book as well.
I love that. As someone who also works in the corporate finance world, I'm in. So why don't you tell me a little bit about what your writing process is like?
Yeah, I'm kind of a write everywhere sort of person. So I love writing in cafes, in bars. Typically my writing process starts while I'm walking. So a lot of development is I'll go for a walk and I'll kind of work out bigger plot points, bigger ideas and characters. And then I'll sit down and I'll start to write out kind of a rough outline, notes, characters, kind of tent poles, if that makes sense. And then once I get that doesn't usually take long, and that'll evolve throughout the writing process. So once I do that, it's maybe 3 or 4 hours. I'll sit down. I'll usually write maybe 5,000 words, get to know the characters. I'll go back to that outline, kind of figure out where the major hurdles I've put in, the problems that I now need to solve that I've created for myself. I'll work on that outline a little bit more, and then I'll kind of start writing in earnest. I tend to draft fairly fast in my first kind of drafting session. So I'll usually draft kind of the very first, very rough draft in 4 to 6 weeks. And then I'll take another month to do a pretty in-depth read through, rewrite, and then I'll do a text to speech session, which takes forever, and then I'll go back and do another read through, and then I'll go through the editor. So that's the cradle to grave, I guess, how it gets done.
A text to speech pass through, I think, is just so important. Mm-hmm. Whether it is, you reading the dialogue out or having, someone read it out with you. I never honestly thought of having the computer read it to you, but oh my goodness, like literally it's right there.
So I'm also dyslexic. And so I miss so much when I read, and especially words that look the same. I cannot catch them visually. And so it's like an accessibility feature, really, for me as well. And it's something everyone should use, but that's kind of how I look at it. It's like this has become like how I'm like able to write with accessibility, which I love.
I love that. That is, I never even thought of that as a tool, but that is, yeah, that's excellent. And you can always tell as a reader when someone didn't read their dialogue out loud. I feel like I can always tell, like,
Yeah.
did you really say this out loud? Did you have anyone read it? Did you have a program? Like nothing read this out loud.
I always like a lot of times I will talk my dialogue out loud. Like if I'm not in public, I'll talk my dialogue out loud as I'm writing it too.
Yeah, I think that's
So,
the perfect way to go about it. That
yeah.
way, the dialogue then feels more authentic and natural and just real.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I love that. And wow, you really get through a draft like pretty quickly.
I do like once I started, it is quite intense. And the part of why I go fast, like I don't typically read while I'm drafting. So like my reward to myself is I get to go back to my books. And so I'm like I will have like my TBR will pile up and I'm like I've got to keep drafting so I can start reading again. Or like I'll try to read my book club book and it'll take like I'm like 6 weeks and I still won't finish my book club book. Like the only time I go to book club without my book read is when I'm drafting. So
Yeah, I have the problem where I'm like, well, maybe I'll read for a little bit and then I'll sit down and do some writing. And the next thing I know, I've been reading for 3 hours and I didn't do any writing. So,
yeah,
using it as a reward is probably a far more efficient
yeah,
method of approaching drafting.
yeah. That's
Absolutely.
what I think. Yeah.
Because we all just want to go back to our books.
Exactly. Exactly. Like you became a writer because you were been in your books forever, right? Like everyone who's a writer was that like ferocious reader as a kid.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about what your publishing journey has been.
Yeah. So I didn't query, and I think there's this misconception that everyone who's an indie author queried forever and was just rejected. And I didn't want to. Everything I had heard about querying was that it's like very soul crushing. And I'm like, I do not know if my little heart can handle this. And so before I wrote my first novel, Dishwasher Safe, I had been writing a lot through the pandemic when a lot of people were writing, but even before then, even throughout my 20s, I had been writing. But I had written like 600,000 words on AO3, kind of in a very short amount of time. And that kind of hyper obsession was kind of concluding. And I'm like, I think I want to write a novel. I think I want to make this happen. I'm like, I don't want to query. I don't want to try to like publish it. At the time, I thought is I don't want to try to publish it for real, and then that's obviously changed. But I'm like, I'm just gonna put it on like Amazon ebooks, and we'll like see what happens. I am someone who can never just do things a little bit. Like it's either all the way or nothing. So learned more about self-publishing. I actually like didn't know a ton about it. Like I'm not super into the bookish internet, so I didn't have a great concept of this entire idea of being like an indie author and that there's an entire ecosystem for indie authors. So as I kind of learned, oh, there's an option you can get on like Book Talk, you can get on or Bookstagram more. I'm a little on Book Talk, a little more on Bookstagram. And as I kind of learned that this was an option, um, kind of got more into it. I learned how to get like professional covers made. I got really lucky. I found great editors through a fan fiction connection. So it kind of has come together as I wrote my first novel and kind of learned how to do it. And then with my second one, it's just gotten so much like easier on the publishing side, right? Like I know where to get covers. I know how to promote the book. I learned what Canva was. Like this is how like not in this is I was trying to do things on Photoshop and I do not know Photoshop. So I learned what Canva was and I'm in there now. So yeah, it's just been a lot of like learning trial by fire.
I love Canva. I just want to put that one out there. I use Canva for absolutely everything. And I will fully admit that, yes, everything I do, everything I post is made on Canva.
Same. Like I don't know how to do anything without Canva.
Yeah, I'm useless if you put me in front of like Photoshop or something, I absolutely useless. Can't do anything. But Canva, even my website now is through Canva. Like literally everything I do is through Canva. They
Yeah.
should sponsor me.
Write them. Let them know. They
Right.
should. I
I
agree.
will let them know. Canva, I use you for everything, and I tell everyone I use you for everything. So you should just sponsor Must Love Books podcast.
I endorse that.
Yes. And we have an endorsement already. See, we're
See?
halfway
There
there.
you go.
Halfway there. So I want to reflect back on what you said in the beginning of your publishing journey. I do think that once upon a time, yes, the way that self-publishing was viewed was very negative and was very much like, oh, you self-published because you couldn't get a book deal. And I'd have to say, like, the biggest thing that has really changed that perception is the pandemic and the rise of book talk and TikTok has completely changed like how readers and how other writers view self-publishing. There are so many successful indie authors. There are so many successful self-published authors who have written amazing, incredible works. And sometimes they are even offered book deals with a trad publisher because of that success. And sometimes they take them and sometimes they say, no, I'm doing just fine on my own. Thank you. And so today I think that, self-publishing has much more positive connotations with it. And I love indie authors. Every single one of you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think too, like I always think like back kind of in the day, when I was a kid, so I come from like a very bookish family, and I know that there'd kind of be they're self-published. That's a vanity project. And it really was because you had to go out and find a vanity publisher who would do a 10,000 book print or a 5,000 book print, right? Like they would have a print minimum. And so you weren't just paying for editors and cover, you were also paying for a really large initial inventory. So you were paying, you know, what today would be like probably 15 or $20,000. I don't know what it would have been like in the 90s to do this. And so it really was a vanity project that you had to have a lot of money to do. And being an indie author, you do have to pay, your editors, cover design. But other than that, like it's not, it's fairly accessible once you're able to come up with those costs. And I think that that's changed the game as well. And especially as publishing has gotten to be a much harder industry, right? Like, whatever it was 20 years ago, publishing is so hard today. And I think that's why you see the rise of indie authors.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as an indie author, one thing that you are a big proponent of is working with indie
Yeah.
bookstores. So, let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I have had a lot of success with indie bookstores, and I think it can be. I think there's something when you start as an indie author, it can feel adversarial to work with indie bookstores, and it's really not. I think a lot of indie bookstores are like, we get a million books a day, we can't buy everything, and I think understanding that one of the things I have found a lot of success with this past book is doing promo kits and being able to promote bookstores rather very specifically on Instagram. So what I did is in my book solicitation email, I offered bookstores a promo kit with signed book plates, stickers, character art, if they bought the book. And then additionally, I also offered bookstores if they wanted to do a collaboration on Instagram where I would do a graphic for them and add them as a collaborator. And they were able to kind of instantly accept and go straight on their feed. And that way they didn't have to do additional promo work, but that social media was kind of already made. So that was really successful. And then just being able to do events. I think the one thing is I live in Boston. And so I do have some local events. Our bookstores are always booked and busy with the biggest name authors. If you're able to go to smaller towns, so there's a bookstore in Maine I'm about to visit. I think for a second time I'm working on the details with those guys. It's called the Briar Patch. But I've got one in Illinois called Swallow Stories. I'm going to be at in a couple of weeks. Actually, just 4 days after this podcast comes out. So Swallow Stories on March 29th. If you're able to get to kind of smaller towns, suburbs, newer bookstores, they're going to be really, really excited to have you, which I know is hard if you live in the city, but being able to travel a little bit, I think is huge for starting to build that bookstore audience. And so I think really looking for smaller bookstores. And then I also email every bookstore on bookshop.org's bookstore list, which is about 2,000 bookstores. So I have a really large email list that I've put together that's also been really beneficial. So those are kind of my pieces on how I work with indie bookstores. But again, just figuring out how you can help them and being there for marketing. And I'm not great at social media either. Like I think there's this idea you have to be an influencer, you have to be amazing at social media, and I am not great. And so being okay to say I'm not great at social media, but there are still some small things I can do that make it really beneficial for indie bookstores.
That was very well put. And, I personally think like we want to support indie authors and we want to support indie bookstores. And I think a big part of being able to make both of those things happen is to have and encourage indie bookstores and indie authors to also support each other.
Yeah, agreed. Because I think, like I said, I think it can feel sometimes very adversarial. And I think there are a lot of great bookstores that are willing to support indie authors. And just as an indie author, being willing to support your bookstore. Admittedly, I cannot buy a book from every bookstore I email. I email like 2,000 bookstores. I cannot buy 2,000 books. Like I do not have the funds and I do not have the space. I wish I did on both of those accounts. But I also think like you can still post about them on social. Like when I go to a city, I love going to bookstores. In my author bio, it says I once took a vacation to a bookstore that was Powell's in Portland years and years ago. But when wherever I travel, when I go see family, when I'm just traveling for fun, or even if I'm traveling for work somewhere that has a bookstore, not everywhere I travel for work has a bookstore, a great indie bookstore that I can get to. But I try to go in, I try to like buy a book, just take some pictures, put it on my Instagram. They're not great pictures. They're not high gloss influencer pictures. They're just like snapshots on my phone and just thank them and kind of have like, I've bought some books, I've put you in my social and just support in that way. And even if you can't buy books, even if you can go in and take a couple of pictures, is a great way to just support your indie bookstores.
Time is precious, and so are our pets. So time with our pets is extra precious. That's why we started Dutch. Dutch provides 24/7 access to licensed vets with unlimited virtual visits and follow-ups for up to 5 pets. You can message a vet at any time and schedule a video visit the same day. Our vets can even prescribe medication for many ailments, and shipping is always free. With Dutch, you'll get more time with your pets and year-round peace of mind when it comes to their vet care.
And that really brings us to a big topic that is up for discussion right now on like Threads and Book Talk and Instagram, and that is authors diversifying from Amazon as well as readers diversifying from Amazon.
Yeah, so I want to start actually with readers and then go to authors, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for readers, one thing that's really important, because I totally support readers leaving Amazon, but I think readers for the last few years have told indie authors, we are willing to buy your books if they're on KU. Like we're willing to buy your books in this kind of bulk subscription model on KU. We're not going to shell out $2.99 or $3.99 or $4.99. We're probably not going to bookshop.org. We're not going to Google Books or Kobo. Right, we want them on KU and we will only read them if they're on KU. My first book is not on KU. It was a lot of work to get readers. My second book is going on KU. I made that decision back in like November. I think readers need to start communicating something else to authors, and that's that they're willing to buy physical copies of their book from bookshop.org. I know that's really expensive, but as an option. The other thing, and I know this sounds counterintuitive and counterproductive, is that if you are canceling your Kindle Unlimited subscription, keep buying those indie authors on Amazon, at least in the short term. Amazon authors cannot instantly turn off KU. They're stuck in 90-day exclusivity agreements. That's why their ebooks aren't anywhere else. And so make sure you're communicating, hey, indie author, not only am I leaving KU, but I am going to support you in these other places. I think for readers, as you diversify and divest from Amazon, think about how you can still support your indie authors and you're not just leaving them in the dust, right? Because they are out there and there are other places for you to find indie authors. So that's part one. And that gets me to authors, and that is make sure there are other places your books are available. And so I think the first thing with authors is that if you are on KU, that's okay. Your print copies are not exclusive. So make sure you're on Ingram Sparks. First off, get your book on Ingram Sparks. It's really simple to do. The one thing you're going to have to do is buy your own ISBN number. They're not that expensive. It's maybe 50 or $60 for one. Got a ton of books coming out. You can buy a 10 pack. That's a little more expensive, but they're like $25 a piece when you do that. Maybe if you want to find some other authors and split up a 10 pack, like that's a good option as well. So buy your ISBNs, get your book onto Ingram Sparks, at least a paperback version. And now you can start marketing to indie bookstores. You're going to be on bookshop.org, and you can start to diversify your marketing away from Amazon too, which I think is big. And so now your marketing is not just KU, KU, KU. Your marketing's, hey, go to your indie bookstore and special order. I do a lot of reader education in my marketing. Like, this is how you special order. I'll do videos where I'm like showing where my book's available for pre-order, how to get it on bookshop.org. I've got like a little graphic, like call your bookseller or go to bookshop.org or go to their website. So I think that that's really important because when I first started talking about diversifying from Amazon, people had not started kind of jumping ship. My initial kind of fear about Amazon was not so much that readers were going to leave, but that we were going to start seeing an algorithm that became very unfriendly to certain sort of books, right? Which I think we're seeing in Meta, we're seeing in TikTok, as social media essentially capitulates and bows down to this new administration. We are seeing kind of more liberal, more radical voices, specifically LGBTQ voices, people of color, disabled voices that are going to have a harder and harder time finding their place in the algorithm. And so that's the other thing as well. If you're able to send your ARCs to bookstores, offer to send them PDFs. You don't have to spend physical ARCs, those are very expensive, but offer to send a PDF or an EPUB file to bookstores so they can start to get familiar with your work. Just be very gracious to bookstores with your work so their staff can start to read it.
The Amazon boycotts they're growing stronger every day. They really are. And, every week we're seeing more and more people talking about that they are, canceling their KU, they're canceling their Amazon Prime. And on one hand, like, that is great. Like, we do need to take Amazon down a notch or two. They've grown too big, and that's partially because we've allowed them to, and we've supported them in that endeavor. But the onus is on us to also ensure that the indie authors who rely on Amazon as their source of income and as their, ability to create more art or even, pay their bills, it's on us to ensure that those authors are still able to be supported. And whether that is, moving to Libby or focusing on more paperback copies, supporting them when we see them in bookstores, connecting with social media and connecting at events, when there's book conventions or bookstore events going on, the more that we support indie authors, not just with our money, but with our time and with our energy, the more that we can kind of help save that industry from being targeted, because we know that's going to happen. We know that it already has been happening, and it's something that unfortunately I think is only going to get worse and more severe, and it's really up to us to actually put the work in and do something about that.
Yeah, and I'm going to expand on what you said about Libby. If indie authors are on KU, they can't be on Libby, which is really tough. But even if they're not on Libby, even if they're still kind of stuck on that KU contract, you can still recommend their paper copies, their paperback books to your library. Again, I live in Boston. It's very, very easy. You can log on to the Boston website, you put your library card in, and you can recommend up to 20 books a month. So um, both my first book and now my second book are going to be in the Boston Library. But if you have an indie author you really love and you don't know how to support them, especially if you just cannot shell out, the $18 to $20 for a paperback book from a bookstore, go to your librarian and say, hey, how do I get my favorite author, my favorite indie author into the library? Because your indie author is going to make money off of this. They're going to get exposure from their books being read. That's amazing, amazing, amazing. So look and see what your library offers just on their website. And even if you don't have a library card, you can usually get one right online. It's super, super easy. I like have two. I have like my physical Boston card and then a separate one for online just by accident. They're apparently not linked. Um, so that's a huge option. And then if you're in a smaller town, you can maybe email your librarians or even go talk to them in person.
I love any ideas for helping to support the indie community because honestly, it's we love them. We love our indie authors. We love our indie books. We love the entertainment they give us and the joy that they give us. And if we want to keep being able to access those, we have to really show the support and do the work and, talk to your local libraries, talk to your local indie bookstores. We can also help indie authors get into these stores because if we ask for it, and if we show that we're going to, buy it and we're going to show support, then these indie bookstores will contact them. They will bring these books in.
Yeah, especially like if you're buying from bookshop.org or straight from their website, and bookstores are seeing, oh, we've gotten 4 or 5 or 6 pre-orders or just like normal special orders for books that aren't in our store, like they will start to bring those in. So that's a big thing too, and a big way to start to encourage bookstores to bring your books in.
And I understand that, like, it is difficult to, especially with the rising costs for printing, it is difficult to buy a physical book of every author that you love and want to support. I completely understand that. And, unfortunately, that's how Amazon grew in the first place was by undercutting other book retailers, and they were the cheapest place to get books. And when people were buying from Amazon, even if Amazon was getting a loss, the fact that other bookstores weren't getting that money was enough. I mean, this is why we lost Borders, is directly because of Amazon, especially because the two used to be linked at one point.
I think the other thing too is, as like I've said before, as authors see that people are buying their books outside of Amazon and their revenue is changing, they'll be comfortable taking off their books out of KU and going what they call wide, right? And now the books are going to be on places like Kobo Plus or Everand, which are also subscription services that are not tied to Amazon. So there are other book subscription services. Let authors know it's okay, and that is buying physical copies of the books, and it's actually just buying Amazon books in the short term. Let them know it's okay to go wide with their books.
Just support indie authors any way that you are able to. There are so many different ways that you can help indie authors. By supporting indie authors, we support publishing as a whole, in my opinion, which might seem like counterintuitive in some ways. Like, if you're supporting indie, does that mean you're not supporting trad? No, because if you're supporting indie authors, especially these last few years, really set the trends that trad publishing then follows.
Yeah, and I also think as indie authors grow, we get just more diverse voices, right? I think trad publishing has very traditionally been white, heterosexual, cisgendered. Um, I don't want to say specifically male because I think there's always been kind of a robust romance infrastructure, but it has featured not a particularly diverse cast of voices, but indie has been able to break through that. So we've seen more disability rep, we've seen more people of color, we've seen um, more queer voices, especially queer voices that have been able to shine through in indie that trad publishing has had to catch up with, right? I think if you look at kind of queer men loving men romance, that really exists in the indie space. And I think we see more and more trad publishing embracing queer voices because of
Yeah, and it just goes to show why indie publishing is so important to publishing as a whole.
yeah.
And, which is fantastic. Indie publishers and self-published authors are leading the industry.
Yeah, exactly. And we also can turn things so much faster. During COVID, the trad publishing timeline got very, very long.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like 2 years from turning in a manuscript or something until it comes out. That may be completely wrong, but I started writing my first book in February of or like late January 24, and my second book in mid 24, and so I have two books out. And if we were in trad publishing, my first book would still be lumping along if it were to be picked up. And so I think that's the other thing is we can respond not because our work is less quality, it's just because we're not under 17,000 pieces of red tape. And so our titles are print on demand, so we're not waiting for like printing time, we're not waiting for like the absolute perfect date in the market. We're not competing against, a 2 year out publication schedule at a large print, like a large publisher. So we're able to kind of just keep going and produce very high quality work, but not at a 2 year lead time.
Yeah, and that right there has really helped indie and self-publishing kind of take over the industry. I mean, obviously trad publishing is still successful for many authors. In many ways, trad sells better. They have better marketing budgets, and I can understand a lot of indie authors don't have that kind of a marketing budget. I
Yeah,
just love to
absolutely.
see how much indie has grown and has really gone from being the underdog of publishing to now leading the industry.
Yeah, and I'm not anti-trad, like I'm not an anti-trad publishing at all. If like Berkeley Romance or Afterglow or any of the big imprints called me and say, "Hey, get an agent, we'll do your next book," I'm not going to say no to that, right? Like a lot of my hesitancy to query was just this seems really hard. I am not trying to be an author like full time. I have another job. I'll always have that other job. Like that's not anything I plan to give up anytime soon. Um, and I did not want to put myself kind of through just the demoralization of queering. And maybe it would have worked great for me, but maybe not, right? Like it's really hard to know. And it just depends on kind of the whims of the agents that day in the market. And so that is not where I wanted to go with my life at the moment. I didn't want to just sit and scroll and wait and look and hope. I wanted to get a book out. And so that's why I did what I did. And like I said, if these get big enough, if the market likes them and Trad wants to publish me and this isn't, an arduous, horrific journey, I'm totally for it. I just do not want some of the horror stories I've heard.
Yeah, and I can absolutely understand that as well. I mean, I am taking a break from querying because I'm rewriting and had a new idea on where I wanted my novel to go. So I did take a break from querying to go back to the writing board. And but I do intend to return to querying, and it is it is a process, and it is tough, and it does take time. So I absolutely understand and fully support anyone who just wants, I just want my book out
Yeah.
any way possible. Like, I so understand that feeling. There are many times where I'm just like, maybe I should just stop querying and just like do this myself. So like I'm flip-flopping all the time on what I want to do, and I'll probably flip-flop about 17 more times before I actually do something. But
I will say part of the reason I was comfortable indie publishing is I had put so much fan fiction out there and so long. So I'd gotten very comfortable putting my work out kind of online without a lot of support. Not that my fan fiction is great. I'm not, don't go find it. But I had written very fast. I'd gotten very comfortable with that process. And so going indie kind of felt like a natural extension of that. And so if you are used to that process, I think it feels very natural. If you're someone who's kept their work very close to them for a very, very long time, traditional publishing may feel actually easier in that sense because you've got someone to guide you along and help versus just like diving in the deep end and saying, let's see what happens.
yeah, absolutely. And I fully support and love all forms of publishing, whatever way you want to put your book out there, do whatever works best for you. And in the end, readers, it's up to us to just support our authors and support the people who write these wonderful, wonderful books that we are all not just in love with, but maybe even obsessed with.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, do you have any future projects that you can share about?
Ooh, I have one that's like very, very early, like some notes and a couple of thousand words. I'm not quite ready to talk about it. It's not quite like neither Dishwasher Safe or The Witch of Wall Street are technically connected, but they definitely exist in the same universe. And so this is another book that I think is going to have a similar feel where it's like kind of paranormal or supernatural creatures doing very normal things. Which so the Dishwasher Safe was about a mermaid who falls for the dishwasher, the guy, not the appliance, because he's the dishwasher, she's the chef at the restaurant, like the CSAT chef. And then the Witch of Wall Street's a witch, obviously, is an investment banker. And so the next one is more paranormal creatures doing more normal things. I think that one's going to be maybe a small town romance. I'm really excited about that because both of these, my past two books have been city books. But that's all I can say. It's so early, and I'm like really just like I finally got through promotion on this book, or like the vast amount of promotion. I sent like promo boxes and promo kits and emails, and the 8 million little tasks that challenge your executive function as an indie author are now mostly done. So I now feel like I've got the ability to take a breath and kind of start to go back to drafting. So I will probably start drafting in earnest like today.
I have to say, I love when authors create their own like literary universe. And, just because the books don't officially interconnect in a storyline, the fact that they all do exist in the same universe is just something that I enjoy, especially as someone like I love comic books. I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, give me a interconnected universe for like everything, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, I like also am very much a big fan of having kind of a universe that exists, but you don't feel the pressure to interconnect the stories or the characters necessarily. Where you've got kind of these really loose affiliations. And I actually read a lot of comic books during the pandemic, and I liked this. It sounds so weird. I like this idea that you could read a comic book and really not know the background and just roll with it. I'm also someone who will like read like the second book in a series and just roll with it as well. Like not usually like mid-action, but like in a romance series, right? I'll read like book two and never go back to book one and never read book three. Um, so I like that lived-inness without feeling like you have to do homework before you get into it.
Yeah, there have been a few where I've done that as well, mostly by accident. Like,
Always by accident.
yes, yeah, there was one I was reading by Katie Roberts, and like I saw the cover and like there's like a some kind of vampire and a siren or something. I'm like, and I immediately bought it. Like that was all I knew about it. I immediately bought it. So I bought it and I started reading it, and a few chapters in, I start realizing they keep referencing something that happened before. And I'm like, oh, let me actually go back to that very first inserted page on there where it talks about other books. Yep, nope, this is book two. You know what? And I just kept reading it anyway.
I just did that with A Werewolf's Guide to Seducing a Vampire by
Yes,
Sarah
Sarah Hawley.
Holly.
Mm-hmm.
And I read only that one. And I have the other ones at home. I just kept buying them because I liked them and put them on my TBR. And that's the first one I committed to buying. But I think I actually own the whole series. I like them. I'm like, I'll read this. And then it goes on the TBR and I'm buying them while I'm writing. And then I never got back to it.
I have definitely done that a few times now. And also shout out to Sarah. I had her on my podcast in
Oh,
2024,
amazing.
and I adore her so
Oh,
much.
so cool.
All right, well, MJ, I just want to thank you so much for joining me on Must Love Books podcast today, and I'm so happy to celebrate the release of The Witch of Wall Street with you.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been amazing.
This has been so wonderful.
Yeah, order Witch of Wall Street from bookshop.org or ask your local indie bookstore for it.
There we go, and we have it. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been Must Love Books podcast. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been Must Love Books. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon under at Must Love Books Podcast. Thank you and happy reading.
Time is precious. precious, and so are our pets. So time with our pets is extra precious. That's why we started Dutch. Dutch provides 24/7 access to licensed vets, with unlimited virtual visits and follow-ups for up to 5 pets. You can message a vet at any time and schedule a video visit the same day. Our vets can even prescribe medication for many ailments, and shipping is always free. With Dutch, you'll get more time with your pets and year-round peace of mind when it comes to their vet care.